Coming in. Firstly, thanks so much for coming. For those that don't know me or perhaps know my face but not a name, I'm Richard Bartlett and I'm a director on the board of Rowing Victoria. And on behalf of Rowing Victoria, I'd like to thank you for coming and for your time this evening as we launch the Victorian Pathways Program Rowing for 2019-20, or the VPP as it will be referred to. And I know that's a term that some of you are familiar with. But for those that aren't, what is the VPP? And this is my definition of it. A structure to enable our athletes and coaches to be identified, managed, developed and ultimately succeed in the sport of rowing at an underage level, and to ultimately compete and succeed at elite level on the world stage. So I think it's a pretty good definition of what we in Victoria are trying to do through the VPP. This evening you'll hear from Noel Donaldson, the VIS and Rowing Victoria head coach, Jen Schuster, the Rowing Victoria State Talent Pathways Coordinator, and they'll outline the significant details that those of you here as athletes and coaches and other interested parties will want to learn. But I want to start by thanking our 2018-19 Rowing Victoria head coach Mike Mackay and Chair of Selectors David Yates for their work in this space. The RV board was keen to engage a head coach last season to act as a mentor to both coaches and athletes and to reinvigorate the culture of the Big V in our challenge to win the Rowing Australia Cup. Victoria has always had a proud and successful history in the event, but we haven't won it since 2016. And while that's only 3 years ago and might not seem like that long ago for some of you, we've won it 13 times out of 20 occasions it's been contested since 1999. And the next most successful state is our arch rival New South Wales with 6, and we want to keep it that way. Mick's worked hard with the team to be successful, and we couldn't have asked him to do more as a proud and passionate Victorian. And David Yates has been our Chair of Selectors for 10 years, and few would understand the hours of work both direct at the river and off the water that goes into our policies, trials and teams. So I'd like you to thank them for their work in the past year. Thank you. So tonight I'm proud to announce that Noel Donaldson has been appointed as the Rowing Victoria head coach, and that this aligns with his role as the Victorian Institute of Sport head coach. And we're thankful to the VIS for luring Noel back from the land of the long white cloud to the VIS, and that the VIS support his appointment as the Rowing Victoria head coach. Noel's coaching record is well documented and I don't need to go over it tonight. Many of you here have worked with him before or have been working with him since his return. He's a passionate Victorian and he'll drive our state with his extensive knowledge, leadership and management skills. I also want to congratulate Tom Courtney in his appointment as Chair of Selectors for 2019-20. So can we congratulate both those guys, please? At Rowing Victoria, we've been working with Rowing Australia and particularly Deputy Performance Director Jamie Fernandez to sign a new agreement for Victoria to deliver an elite pathway program for under 19, under 21 and under 23 coaches and athletes. And we're thankful that Rowing Australia recognises that Rowing Victoria is the lead organisation to manage this program. I'd also like to thank Rowing Victoria CEO Nick Gall and President Joseph Joyce for their work on this collaborative agreement. Rowing Australia has also agreed on its level of support with the Victorian Institute of Sport, and with these new agreements now signed, we're in the final stages of an MOU with both Mercantile Rowing Club and Melbourne University Boat Club to build on their already elite programs to aspiring underage athletes. Both clubs will continue to receive significant funding to do so. So I want to mention that this is the first time that an agreement strictly between Rowing Australia and Rowing Victoria such as this has been entered into, and that while it falls outside our board's current strategic plan, it was clear that we had to step up and step into this space to support our clubs and also their athletes. I want to reiterate that Rowing Victoria's role in this space is to be the lead organisation for rowing in this state and support clubs and athletes. So some of the key benefits that for the first time RV will plan to provide is that VIS scholarship holders will receive $3,000 to defray costs for the 2019-2020 season in a VIS program for up to 20 athletes if they meet standards. This is supplementary to the benefits provided to the VIS scholarship. Victorian team members will receive $1,000 towards training expenses and travel to selection events, which is outside of the already existing RV contribution through the long existing interstate fund. Both these are significant initiatives. I'm sure as an athlete you'll be very happy to hear that news. Our agreement with Rowing Australia will deliver significant funding to 2 clubs, and it'll also provide support for us to work with other clubs to enable them to deliver a VPP program in the future. Importantly, athletes and coaches at clubs not financially supported through the VPP are eligible for support if at performance standards, and they'll be outlined later today and through the season to you by the Rowing Victoria and VIS head coach Noel. Our vision through the VPP is to have Victoria as the leading state in the country, both at the interstate regatta and ultimately with a number of Victorians on national under 19, under 21 and under 23 teams, and of course into the future to row alongside our 10 current Victorian elite rowers at the National Training Centre. Thank you, and I'd now like to pass over to Noel. Thanks, Noel.
Technology right here. Dick's muted and I'm on. Thank you very much. I'm honoured to stand in front of you tonight. A role that perhaps I've had previously, but I never take anything for granted, and it's actually good to be home with my family and back in this great state and realising what we need to do. Some 3-ish years ago, Bill Tate, as the head coach of the VIS, delivered the first introduction of what the VPP was once Rowing Australia determined that it was going to have 2 centralised training centres for men and women. We learned through those processes. Bill's presentation that night, I've seen it on video. It's on the Rowing Victoria website. If you'd like to check back about what it was, it's an hour and a half long presentation, but we like trying to keep it fairly succinct tonight in terms of what we're actually trying to do. Naturally, all the states will have learnt in these last 2 to 3 years about what it means to be a pathway program. So we're called the Victorian Pathway Program, but each state, primarily through their institute or academy and their state association, runs a similar program. Western Australia has been hailed as our model example. In some respects, we look to New South Wales as well too, because they've got 4 clubs up there who are providing a similar direction than what the 2 clubs are here. So we've spent some time talking to the states about their delivery in recent times, about what we learn by what they're doing, about what we should actually be doing here. The one thing I think I'd like to do is to make sure we understand how important our alignment is through the entire process, from Rowing Australia, the national body who fund us significantly, through Rowing Victoria, the VIS, under the auspices here in Victoria of now being known quite clearly as the VPP, Pathways Program. Before that it had a couple of other acronyms in terms of how it was named and delivered, but we're quite clear about what our objectives actually need to actually be. So the background is centralisation has driven the states to take on the development portfolio, and all of us are being tasked by Rowing Australia under campaign number 1 to provide as many athletes to the national training centres as we can. So tonight's about the development and how we go about that part of the sport. Rowing Victoria and Jen's role, Jen has a secondary role which is about participation. Tonight's not about participation. Tonight's about underage primarily development, or how we feed the national training centres. So I'll go through some aspects of that, and we're going to continue to educate as best we possibly can over the next few weeks. The Rowing Victoria website will be one of the key mechanisms in terms of finding out activities that you need to do and the like. The day-to-day operations of the VPP will be run by Nick Mitchell, Matt Ryan, Jen Zuster until Christmas time, because she's about to have a baby, and myself, and there'll be someone else that will fulfil that role. We report to a member of the Rowing Victoria board, and Amy Fernandez in terms of an overall structural management group. But the day-to-day stuff is left to that small group of people. So in terms of the activities, we've already met. Nick and Matt are really on side with what we're trying to actually do. Their clubs are still working on the finalisation of the Memorandum of Understanding with Rowing Victoria. So a few little teething things we're still working through, but we're getting there. We're very confident about the positive way we need to go forward. What I'd like to think about is, and being back for 2 or 3 months, and where I see maybe some gaps in what we're doing, is understanding the need, even at underage high performance, about a performance culture. A performance culture that needs to be process driven. And some of the things that we'll actually do might seem like they've got outcome focus, and the outcome is we've been given that clear mandate to be able to perform well and get athletes pushing up through the system. The way which we'd like to educate it and teach it is through process. Now that might sound cliched and old-fashioned, but it's about athletes developing and improving and understanding what the standards they need to embark upon if they're going to be able to get into the pathway and succeed. So to do that, there'll be many activities that people will need to be involved with. So aligning those activities from Rowing Australia's requirements to the state team's requirements is really important from our perspective. And although I hear in New South Wales that a lot of the athletes are not liking the concept of being evaluated, it's a necessary evil. Rosanna Stanimirovic was the sports psychologist with the AIS program a few years ago. She now coordinates the Gold Medal Ready program for the AIS. He's going to be able to speak to that at the chairman's round table after the Sport Australia dinner in a couple of weeks' time about the needs for people to understand what high performance is all about, and assessment is a really key, important part of that. So one of the things we want to encourage as young athletes is to not run away. Her words are, it is a normal thing to be tested. So to be tested, to test well, you need to train well. And I see that's a significant gap that we could make all the excuses under the sun about the difficulties on the Yarra River, whatever it might be. We've got university commitments. There's a whole range of things with our development athletes that we need to overcome those barriers and work towards a really exciting performance culture. And I try and say that with some excitement. I'm a pretty dull, boring character when it comes to that sort of thing there too, but I really want the athletes that are in the room tonight, and you with your mates and friends and whatever, to get on board, enjoying the fact of training hard, enjoying the fact of competing against one another and seeing yourselves develop. Because without that, so often I've been told, we don't have our role models anymore. We don't have the people to look up to. I've heard so many positive things about Ben Coombs, who's sitting in the back of the room, and what an inspiration he was last year because he trained here, not in a training centre, and he set the standard. And what if he gets to the NTC, which is what he wants to actually do? We're going to help you with that process. And part of that process is to evaluate you and test you and show you the way. Right? From some regular assessments towards how the coaches conduct their programs on a day-to-day basis. And we would obviously be hoping that that will be across our entire state. And we deliberately didn't invite our regions because we're publicising this to the regions tonight. And we'll give them a summary of that sort of thing. But we want those people to feel like they are engaged and very much part of rowing in Victoria as well. In simple, at the very top end, Rowing Australia through the AIS and Sport Australia have a series of what's called categorisation. Category 1 are the people who are winning the medals, and down primarily to Category 5. Normally, Categories 1, 2 and 3 are the athletes that are in the national training centres, generally called podium potential, podium ready. The ones who are about to embark internationally and do something. So that's a clear process. We are part of a moderating panel that determines that categorisation. Categorisations 4 and 5 about our emerging and developing athletes. They are the athletes who will be VIS scholarship holders from the new scholarship period going forward. Some obviously are already on that, and they will retain that categorisation going forward, and by so doing will get a scholarship and the benefits that the VIS can produce. Through the VPP, our next level categorisation, we're yet to number them because there are some modifications that the AIS and Sport Australia are making to categories 6 and 7, which is Commonwealth Games and International. They look like going, so we've got to determine a number, but a number is only a number. But then in our state program, we will have consecutive numbering in terms of performance standards. So therefore, if you say miss out on a VIS scholarship, you might be on the first rung of Rowing Victoria's pathway program, and you'll receive support, and you'll get the coaching, and you'll get those sort of things as well. And so to be able to determine what those categorisations are, you need to perform well. To perform well, we need to have measurable activities for you, which then opens the doors for people in the country. Doing the activities remotely and the like, if they're good enough, they get part of that as well too. So it's not a Melbourne-centric thing, although the majority of people will obviously come from Melbourne, and the majority will still come from the two big clubs, hence the partnership. But the door is open for anyone from any other club also, for athletes who perform well to be part of the program. We're still framing up those activities, and part of the reason why we can't tell you exactly what they are is we're still waiting to see the Australian under-23 selection, the para selection, the under-21, of which we met with Rowing Australia today about as well. We want to let you know that all these things are coming, and therefore they'll be quite clear in terms of the activities that you actually need to do to be part of that pathway. The only policy that's available at present is the senior policy for the NTC-based athletes and what they're required to do throughout this coming season. So keep an eye on the Rowing Victoria website, because we will publish these as we know them. I'll mention Anna Holt, who's in the back of the room here. Anna's our physiologist at the VIS. She's also conducting part of her PhD project, a project on power in rowing. And as such, we've just been recipients of a whole heap of new Peach rowing biomechanical gear, and there'll be up to about 16 athletes who will be able to participate in that program and have the benefit of a bit of scientific background. So that'll be some VIS athletes, but it'll also be VPP athletes that will benefit from that as well. Now, that process has already started with Matt and Nick about identifying those particular athletes. But that aside, what sits on our early radar, before I hand over to Jen, and then at the end of it we'll get you to ask questions. It's really important that anything that we're not clarifying now, and it might be partly semantic at the moment in terms of understanding, at least you could ask some questions if you have any, and that's a really important process, because from here the state selectors will be, so from a date perspective, at the end of this week the state selectors will be chosen by the Rowing Victoria board. We then have a period of about 2 weeks to put together the state selection policy. Tom and I have already been doing some framework on that for the selectors, so they don't start from cold. And obviously what we've done in the past will help guide it, but some new things for them as well. And so then the state policies will become available as well. Looking to move forward all the nomination criteria to quite early. If we can get it up and running, we'll have it all done by the 12th of October. And that people will know quite clearly what all the national and all the state-based activities actually will be. In the interim, this is something to look forward to before I hand over to Jen. And this is the regularity of things that come. Senior A athletes have already needed to nominate. They needed to do that on the 23rd of August. And that was for senior selection and for NTC selection. NTC intake athletes were informed Friday or Saturday. We haven't seen that list yet, but they themselves were the first intake athletes have been told who they are, and they are expected to be in Canberra or Penrith by the 23rd of September. By the 20th of September, the date that's in the program, we're meant to know who are invited to the NTC testing camp that starts on the 30th of September. So they're these activities that are of an RA nature that sit really close on our radar. From a national and therefore state point of view, on the 17th of September, even though the policy is not out yet, under 23 athletes are meant to nominate for national under 23 selection. So that's not long away, that's next week. Under 23, whether it's right, wrong and the policy's not there, that's what's currently on our radar. What is on the radar and what we will participate in is on the 18th of September, the day after, that's next week, is the first 5 kilometre erg test of the year. So anyone who's wanting to do senior selection, under 23 selection, or wants to be in state-based selection who is already in a club, so that's not our school-aged leavers in terms of year 12 who might be leaving. There's an expectation that all of those people under the direction of their club coaches will do a 5k erg test. So then we get athletes off to camp, and by early October we start with some mid-week Karam training sessions for some very identified athletes. Certainly the category 4-5s are already known, the ones who are already on scholarship, the ones who are on training agreements at the VIS. So we start doing some group training. That group training has already started between Melbourne Uni and Mercs, athletes shifting either way and already starting to do some work, but we start to formalise it. We start to do some laboratory testing for the top group. And if we can get all the paperwork up and running by the 12th of October, from then on there's a steady flow of activities that are required by our top people, including once the head coaches meet about regular ergometer training sessions that are monitored. And our first 30-minute rate 20 that a lot of people have been doing, which is a Rowing Australia benchmark, won't be that far off the radar as well. So this document, which will be published very soon, is the Rowing Australia benchmarks document, which is now a Rowing Victoria document as well, and will be targets that we will be aiming for in terms of our physical development off the water if you want to be part of this program. If you don't get them, you don't get them. As I said, it's process driven. So if you're meant to pull 8,700 metres for a 30-minute rate 20 and you only get 8.5, well, you only get 8.5. But if you get around the fact that on the test day you prepare properly, you do your best, you're looking for avenues and ways to improve, you go away, you learn by it, you train better so that the next time round you do a better job, that's what we're looking for. And we need to recognise that your efforts and your endeavours, and you need to encourage one another about, who's the most improved, who's on that improvement radar, because it's never linear in terms of pathway development. Some will develop quickly, others will develop slowly. But we're just here to encourage you. The more you do, the better you're going to actually be at that. All right, so the dates we will be publishing on the website, so look at them. There's a draft here that takes us all the way through to April, when the under-23, under-21 junior selection's on. And that includes the pathway 8s and things that Jen will talk about the younger athletes and their role within this program. But when we let Jen have the floor and whatever, then we'll come back and see whether anyone's got any questions of either Dick, Jen or myself. Thank you very much.
Good evening all. As Noel mentioned, my name's Jen Schuster. I'm from Rowing Victoria. I am the State Talent Pathway Coordinator. And yes, I am pregnant. So I'll be finishing up and having 12 months off from Christmas time. So there will be someone else in my role filling in for 12 months. But I'll make sure that they've got all the information and very capable of filling in my shoes. So Pathway 8s, last season we had 2 8s, a girls and a boys 8, coached by Mitch Nelson and Craig Smith, so thank you guys. This year we are hoping to double our numbers and have a city versus country 8s, so 2 boys 8, 2 girls 8s, to include those athletes from our regional areas as well and our regional coaches. We had a great success in engaging the athletes in the high performance clubs here. We're now seeing those athletes want to continue on and engage in the clubs, with 4 of those athletes looking to go on to junior trials this year. So there is great benefit in running the program, showing the athletes what's involved in being at a high performance club post school. So we hope to be able to have 36 athletes instead of 18 involved in the program. So the requirements and the selections of Pathway 8s will be made available very shortly. The key one is to remember that you need to be 17 as at December 31st of the year we are racing. So that's 17 at the end of next year. That caught out a few people last year. Previously it has been under 19, but we choose to have the Pathway 8s be under 18 so that we can give the kids a development experience, so that then when they're the following year for under 19s, they're ready for junior trials and can genuinely push for junior selection and hopefully go on to race for Australia at Junior Worlds. The education calendar, I've got some copies on the table of dates and topics that we will have coming up over the coming months. We're starting with the VIS experts first up, with nutrition, strength and conditioning, physiology and how to be a high performance athlete. And I've indicated on the calendar the target groups of those sessions. Next year we'll have some rowing specific ones with Noel doing some rigging, and then on to the likes of how to stay engaged in the off season. We'll be also looking to engage La Trobe University and their lecturers with some how to be an effective coach and some other topics around that, around communication. Please feel free, if there's any topics that you would like to see covered off on our education calendar, to let us know. We're very open to suggestions of topics or presenters that you think would be useful for the community. We're really looking to try and increase the knowledge across the board for everyone. So please feel free to make suggestions. The regional structure, as Noel mentioned, we are Facebook live streaming this event. Tomorrow it will be available on our website for anyone that wishes to share the session with anyone that couldn't make it tonight, or for those regional people that want to be engaged. I hope there are a few people on board. We have gone around, Noel and I, to Ballarat, Geelong and the Goulburn Valley region to do some meet and greets with the coaches out there and to communicate with them about the VPP program. I've set up some regional talent ID groups in each of those regions to help us better have an idea of the athletes that are in those areas, and to help that we can have some talented athletes in the Pathway 8s program and feeding into under 21s and under 23s. And state selection and feedback, we have conducted a thorough review of last season's state team selection, the policy, and that is all been put to the Rowing Victoria board with actions that I'm waiting feedback on, and then we will move forward from there. Tom and Noel will be working, the three of us will be working very closely together to make sure that we have some of the best athletes in the team and hopefully go on to win the Australia Cup for another year. And general development matters. I'm here to, my other part of my role is about engaging with the clubs and making sure that all the school kids within the system are aware of the opportunities available to them beyond the high performance system. We want to keep the kids engaged in the sport, whether that be high performance or participation. I'm not particularly fussed. More kids rowing is great, and hopefully that keeps them in the sport, and then they realise they do actually want to do it seriously, and it's not such a big step for them to get back into it. So there will be, in the coming month or two, I have sent out an email to all the clubs asking for them to provide all of their information about their club programs. I will then make that available at regattas that I will be at. I'll send that out to all the school directors of rowing and make it available to parents and athletes If anyone's got any questions about the clubs and the different programs, happy to chat and just see more kids rowing. So I think now we'll hand over to any questions. Thanks very much.
I'll unmute and we can...
Yep. Dick, do you want to come up too? Yep.
What I didn't mention on the horizon soon, the first time trials on Friday the 27th of September at Carrum. That's the public holiday before the grand final. Senior aged athletes have to do it in a single scull, and other athletes can do it as directed by their club programs. There will be David Colvin has kindly offered to be the scribe again in terms of putting it together. There'll be the more senior group will be over 5.7k, and we can only have a certain number of competitors in that. The remaining athletes will do it over 3.8k, and including all the way through all of this. And Hannah's not here tonight, but we've had a good discussion about the para rowers as well. So any para rowers there are fully integrated within our program and receive the same benefits and whatever, and we're just working with them about some of their criteria as well. But yeah, please ask questions if you're uncertain about anything, certainly about alignment, doing more, being tested more, enjoying that sort of side of it, being fully involved in the high performance development program.
Ali?
Probably one more for you, Jen. So with obviously the Pathway 8, there'll be a selection process for that. For athletes that are under 19 that want to go through to trials, or they might be younger but talented enough for that, will there be selection run for that, or is it sort of organised on athletes?
We are looking at having 2 key designated coaches for the under 19 process. So someone to help us identify the talented athletes within the school system, not those club athletes that are still under 19. So those athletes that are, say, at Geelong Grammar that are 18 wanting to do that under 19 process, I'm looking at having a male and a female coach to help in that space, to help us work when we go out to the regattas to see who's performing well. So yes, we will try to work with the clubs, primarily Mercs and Melbourne Uni, to facilitate that process. There will be some selection steps. There will be a Pathway 8 camp that we'll look to have the under 19 athletes at as well, so that we can have as many kids on that camp, and hopefully we can get lots of coaches along to help run that. Does that answer your question? Great.
And sorry, through everything we're actually trying to do, communication is a super important thing, and whenever anyone has a review, it's always the first thing that's talked about. Yeah, we're not communicating as well as we want, but we need that to be two-way. We need to lead that, but we need that feedback. You know, we need to know that. I've got 2 girls that are red hot and really good. How are we going to do this? Why are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? Are they up to speed? And all of those sort of things. So that's really important. And the earlier we can identify who those likely people are, the better the whole process will actually work. You know, because not everyone's going to be an international junior athlete, but if we can flag early and go, right, this is how or why or who it could be and everything as well too. My personal opinion from last year's, or this recent years there too, if we could get a Geelong-based boat or a Ballarat-based boat so that we're not having the relocation type issues, that could be better, you know. Not saying we couldn't do it like we did it, but you know, if you had to rip a double or pair or something, that might be a really good thing. Now we had Jack and Hamish, you know, a couple of years ago. You know, that sort of thing could actually work. And Ballarat Clarendon said they got one really good girl already. So those sorts of things there, you know, we look to trying to establish that really early. And it could be intermingled, without going over the top of Jen, and we've already, I think, got about 6 girls that we know of who are junior age who are coming to the clubs, which is a much higher number than what we normally do. So we need to start looking at, well, where are they destined? You know, where could they actually be? So.
Yep.
Just a question about the new funding stream. Is that $3,000 available, up to $3,000 available per athlete, or is that $3,000 as a total available to 20 athletes?
Per athlete, Ben.
Per athlete.
Per athlete.
And that's not inclusive of what the VIS already provides?
No. That's on top.
Oh, that's
Yep.
We're pretty happy about that as well.
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's fine.
We were transparent when we went to the country because we're doing things a bit more globally. This is a little bit more high performance focused, but we'd be happy to tell you the numbers. You know, there's no secret. You know, we are running about $1 million program between what the VIS puts in, what Rowing Australia puts in, what Merck's put in, what Melbourne Uni put in, you know, and designate towards high performance. And we know that totals around about $1 million. But by golly, it can get spent really, really easily. So it might sound like a lot of dough, but when there's a whole heap of things to do, specifically under the VPP, some of the expenditures are, one, athlete travel is a really important component of that. We haven't done the budgets yet, but we're going to get to there. Coach PD development's part of it. Para support's part of it. Potential strength and conditioning support to clubs as part of it. There's a whole range of myriad of things outside of what the VIS actually do, where people within that program will be beneficiaries of it. The Pathways program will be part of that as well too. Right? So we're trying to make sure that we spend wisely, but in areas where people have earned that.
And surely that money as well is only geared towards either state or national representative selection events. Is that correct?
That's the aim, you know.
For New South Wales states and so on and so forth. Is that?
Yeah, we recognise that people in the main would probably be travelling 3 times roundabout, you know, and it's going to cost you $1,000 a go, you know. Particularly if you want to race really well, you might be on an aeroplane rather than driving, and you know.
The intention of that is if you're a scholarship holder, that's a grant, and we expect that there's a huge amount of expenses, and we want to help defray those expenses. Yeah. It's a little bit different if you're not a scholarship holder, but obviously we're still looking to support state team athletes to $1,000, which is over and above what you would know you've already received before from the RV interstate fund. It's important to understand that all of that funding is from the funding pool that comes from Rowing Australia. So it is Rowing Victoria's funds to disseminate, and thanks to Hamey and the work we've done with that agreement, Rowing Australia is not telling us how we should run the program within our state. They're allowing us, empowering us to be able to deliver that in the best way that we can. Some of those things we're obviously delivering and telling you tonight. Some of those other things that Noel's alluding to we're still working on in terms of where those funds are going to go, and that also includes the support of other clubs that aren't currently about to sign that MOU with us. But that's a really good one for us to announce today, and thanks for raising it again, Ben.
Yeah, thank you.
And the accountants in the room would also understand the GST implications, the tax implications. There's a range of other things that we're trying to work through, so it's as financially efficient as we can possibly make the system.
Any other questions?
That pathway camp, where and when is that likely to be?
Yep, so nationals finish post-nationals. So it'll be 5 or 6 days post-nationals, the last Sunday of nationals, which is during school holidays, which would then give us 2 or 3 weeks before trials to train. The important part to remember is underage selection trials for school-aged athletes is going to be week 2 of term 2. Unfortunately, our school holidays don't align with the rest of the country's school holidays. So that is in the selection policy that will be released very shortly, but we need to make parents and athletes very aware of that.
It's a pain in the arse. We're the state that gets hit the worst by it. You know. And Rowing Australia offered a couple of dates to run those trials, but you know, everyone gets a vote, and of course we're only one. We would have had it somewhere else there to try and make it line up, but it doesn't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just with the junior stuff, there isn't any plan to do anything earlier than that?
We would like to try and, well, it's hard for school-based athletes. We can't do anything earlier than during those school holidays. For athletes, why not? Well, the school athletes need to focus on their Head of the River, Head of the Schoolgirls campaigns. If there are any particular keen athletes that have looked to engage in the clubs of their own choosing, then that's fine. But we would like to be aware as to what's going on, and if we can help in any way, we will. But I can't be pushing from a Victorian perspective. If you want to go to underage trials, you need to be engaging and dealing with your Year 12, your school program on top of everything else. So I know it gets a bit hectic in those last couple of weeks, but that's just how it has to be. If you're a club-based under 19 athlete, then there's no reason why you can't be engaging in the system now. Yeah.
There is absolutely no doubt that the majority of the work that our schools do here is fantastic, and we're the #1 state in school boy and girl rowing at the national championships, and we need to celebrate that fact. We need to respect our schools, but to continue on from Jen, good communication is the key to the whole thing. So if you have a really good relationship with the school of which the athlete is from, and it is all agreed by everybody about how you could actually do it, then you get support. But we would actually be really disappointed if our clubs were working behind the backs of the schools and those sort of things there without the school's agreement up front. We would take a pretty dim view to that. So not that it couldn't or shouldn't happen, but it needs to be communicated really, really well and agreed.
Yeah.
You know, we need to respect the good work that's being done. And then kids come to clubs. Clubs let schools down, kids don't come to clubs. It's quite a really simple process. It's our long-term future, and viability is part of that reason.
Anyone else?
Apologies on behalf of the two head coaches, without talking about what each of their unfortunate family situations are. But Matt texted me earlier this afternoon, because we met with him with Rowing Australia this afternoon anyway, on some development matters. Hope this Arvo evening goes well. I have no doubt we're on the same page and headed in the right direction. We will make a difference. All right? It's all part of making Victoria the #1 state without necessarily making it a rivalry type of situation. It's about us doing looking after our business, getting our processes right, and getting a bigger piece of the pie. At the moment, New South Wales double our numbers in terms of coaching and athlete representation, and we're going to change that.
I do have one question. With junior selection, is there going to be a targeted vote? Are we going to target
Ideally,
to start off with?
Ideally, we need to identify the athletes. So if we only have 2 athletes that are good, then we'll send a double. If we can identify 4 that will make a good Coxed 4, then we'll send them. It's not much good in sending a 4 with 2 good athletes and 2 okay athletes. We've developed some fairly comprehensive benchmark times across the board from under 18 all the way up through the different age groups. So if we can see that we've got a 4 that can hit the benchmark times that warrant sending them to trials, then that's what we will do. But first, it's a matter of understanding the athletes in the system. I've developed a fairly comprehensive database. I'll be asking the coaches to provide me with some feedback, not just on athletes' ergo times, but around their ability, their attitude to training, and their just general characteristics from the coaches' feedback, so that we have an idea as to who we should be looking at. And that will help us understand which athletes we should be then going and talking to ourselves.
You can blame me for that. Jen said, we'll get a couple of boys and a girls Cox 4, that sounds a really cool idea, whatever. And I said, we'll get a single scull. Then we'll get a double or a pair. Then we'll get a 4 or a quad. That principle. So we're trying to identify top-end talent. Rowing Australia, after our meeting today, will raise the benchmark times for selection. And the main reason for that is both the 2 key underage teams this year had a few good boats that sort of achieved their targets and medalled or finalled, but we had some boats in B finals there too. And A final standard is meant to be the bottom end of it, and therefore we need to make those targets. So if we send athletes who we aren't going to get the targets, then we're wasting people's time, money, efforts, and all of those sort of things there too. That's not to disencourage it at all, but it's sort of also harder it is, the better you perform sometimes. You know the standard, which is great. That we work towards it.
Awesome. Noel, Dick and I will be hanging around a little bit afterwards if anyone wants to ask us any other questions. This will be available on our website tomorrow, along with a summary of tonight's session, along with there's a pathway page on our website. All selection policies, event requirements, any further information will be posted on that website. There's a link to our education calendar where all the resources will go up as well. Please feel free to contact any of us if you have any questions. We're available. Thank you very much, guys.